The searing pain in Queen Azara's leg was nothing compared to the humiliation of being dragged from the battlefield by a slave. Her vision blurred, the acrid smell of smoke and blood filling her nostrils as she fought to remain conscious. She had to get back to her troops, to rally them against the invaders. But her body betrayed her, refusing to obey her commands. "Let me go, you worthless worm," she snarled at the human, her words slurring. "I'd rather die than accept your help." The slave, Darius, she vaguely recalled, ignored her protests, his grip firm as he hauled her behind a crumbling stone wall. Azara's eyes widened as a volley of arrows thudded into the ground where she had lain moments before. "With all due respect, your majesty," Darius grunted, his voice strained with exertion, "you're in no position to refuse aid. The Kargath are overrunning our defenses. If we don't get you to safety, the kingdom falls." Azara's retort died on her lips as a deafening explosion rocked the earth. Through the haze of pain and smoke, she saw the gleaming spires of her palace, her home for 3 centuries, crumble into dust. "No," she whispered, the full weight of their dire situation crashing down upon her. For the first time in her long, victorious life, Queen Azara felt the icy grip of fear. And worse still, she realized her fate now rested in the hands of a human she had always considered expendable. Darius grunted as he half-carried, half-dragged Queen Azara through the winding alleys of the lower city. The sounds of battle echoed behind them, punctuated by the occasional earth-shaking explosion. Azara's breath came in ragged gasps, her face contorted in pain and fury. "Stop," she hissed through clenched teeth. "I command you to stop, slave." Darius ignored her, his eyes scanning the narrow streets for any sign of pursuit. "We can't stop, your majesty. The Kargath will be searching for you. We need to find somewhere to hide and tend to your wounds." Azara's hand shot out, gripping Darius's shirt with surprising strength. "I said stop." She pulled herself up, her face inches from his. "How dare you disobey your queen? I should have you flogged for this insolence." Darius met her gaze, his jaw set. "With all due respect, your majesty, you can flog me later if we survive this. Right now, I'm trying to save your life and what's left of the kingdom." For a moment, they stood frozen in a battle of wills. Then, Azara's grip loosened, and she sagged against him. "Fine," she muttered. "But know this, human, once we're safe, you'll pay for your impertinence." Darius nodded grimly and resumed their journey. As they turned a corner, he spotted a dilapidated storehouse. "There," he said, guiding them towards it. "We can rest there for a moment." Inside, Darius lowered Azara onto a pile of old sacks. She winced as her injured leg made contact with the ground. Darius knelt beside her, examining the wound. "It's bad," he said, his voice low. "The arrow went clean through, but it's still bleeding heavily. I need to bind it." Azara's eyes narrowed. "And what do you know of treating wounds, slave? Are you a healer now as well as a disobedient servant?" Darius tore a strip of cloth from his shirt. "I was a field medic in the human armies before I came here. I know enough to keep you alive, at least for now." As he worked to staunch the bleeding, Azara studied him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Why are you doing this? Why not leave me to die and save yourself?" Darius paused, meeting her gaze. "Because despite everything, you're still our queen, and because I believe you're the only one who can stop the Kargath." Azara laughed bitterly. "Look at me, human. I can barely stand. What hope do I have against an entire army?" "You underestimate yourself, your majesty," Darius replied, finishing the makeshift bandage. "Your people believe in you. With you alive, there's still hope. Without you..." He trailed off, the implication clear. A moment of silence passed between them, broken only by the distant sounds of battle. Finally, Azara spoke, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "What's your name, slave?" "Darius, your majesty." "Well, Darius," she said, testing the unfamiliar name. "It seems I owe you a debt. But don't think this changes anything between us. You're still a slave and I'm still your queen." Darius nodded, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Of course, your majesty. Now we should keep moving. The Kargath will be searching house to house soon." As he helped Azara to her feet, a commotion outside caught their attention. Harsh voices and the clank of armor grew closer. Darius peered through a crack in the wall, his face paling. "Kargath scouts," he whispered. "At least a dozen of them, searching the buildings." Azara's hand instinctively went to her side, reaching for a sword that wasn't there. "We can't fight them, not like this," she said, frustration evident in her voice. Darius scanned the room, his mind racing. His eyes fell on a trapdoor in the musty air of the underground tunnels filled Darius's lungs as he guided Queen Azara through the darkness. The trapdoor had led them to a network of ancient passages beneath the city, a labyrinth forgotten by most but known to those who lived in the shadows. "How did you know about these tunnels, slave?" Azara's voice was a mix of suspicion and grudging respect. Darius hesitated before answering. "When you're at the bottom, your majesty, you learn about all the hidden places. It's how we survive." Azara fell silent, digesting his words. The only sounds were their footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the damp ceiling. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Darius could feel the queen's strength waning. Her breathing grew labored, and she leaned more heavily on him with each step. "We need to rest," he said, guiding her to a small alcove. "Your wound needs tending." Azara didn't protest this time, a testament to her exhaustion. As Darius helped her sit, he noticed her face was pale and clammy. Fever was setting in. "I need to clean the wound," he said, reaching for his water skin. "This will hurt, Your Majesty." Azara's eyes flashed with their usual fire. "I've endured worse, human. Do what you must." As Darius worked, Azara studied him intently. "You said you were a field medic. How does a soldier end up a slave in a foreign land?" Darius's hands stilled for a moment before resuming their task. "It's a long story, Your Majesty, one I'm not sure you'd want to hear." "We have time," Azara replied, her tone softening slightly. "And I find I'm curious about the man who saved my life." Darius sighed, gathering his thoughts. "I was part of the human expedition force that came to your lands 5 years ago. We were told we were on a diplomatic mission, to forge an alliance against the Kargath. But our leaders, they had other plans." Azara's eyes narrowed. "The night of betrayal. Your people tried to assassinate me and seize control of the kingdom." Darius nodded, shame evident in his expression. "I didn't know. Many of us didn't. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. Those of us who refused to participate were branded traitors and sold into slavery." A heavy silence fell between them. Azara's face was unreadable, but Darius could sense the turmoil behind her stoic facade. "Why tell me this now?" she finally asked. "Because you deserve the truth," Darius replied, meeting her gaze. "And because if we're going to survive this, we need to trust each other." Azara laughed bitterly. "Trust? How can I trust someone from the very people who tried to destroy everything I built? I'm not asking you to trust all humans, Your Majesty. Just me. Here, now." Their eyes locked, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Azara nodded. "Very well, Darius. You've earned that much, at least for now." As Darius finished tending to her wound, a distant rumble echoed through the tunnels. Both of them tensed, listening intently. "The Kargath," Azara whispered. "They must be using their war machines to search for us." Darius helped her to her feet. "We need to keep moving. There's an old temple not far from here. We might find supplies, maybe even weapons." As they made their way through the winding passages, Azara's strength began to fail her. Darius found himself supporting more and more of her weight. "Leave me," she gasped, her pride warring with her exhaustion. "Save yourself." Darius tightened his grip on her. "Not a chance, Your Majesty. We started this together, we'll finish it together." Just as Azara's legs gave out, they rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast underground chamber. Ancient stone pillars stretched up into the darkness, and at the far end, a massive statue of a forgotten deity loomed over the cavernous chamber of the ancient temple stretched before them, its vastness swallowing the weak light from Darius's makeshift torch. Queen Azara leaned heavily against a crumbling pillar, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Despite her weakened state, her eyes darted around the chamber, taking in every detail with a warrior's instinct. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Darius moved closer, supporting her weight as he guided her further into the chamber. "An old temple, dedicated to gods long forgotten. The slaves speak of it in whispers, a place of power and ancient magic." Azara's eyes narrowed. "You seem to know an awful lot about the secrets of my kingdom, slave." "Knowledge is survival, Your Majesty," Darius replied, a hint of defiance in his tone. "And I've had 5 years to learn." As they ventured deeper into the temple, intricate carvings emerged from the shadows. Scenes of battle, coronations, and rituals covered the walls, telling a story that spanned centuries. Azara's fingers traced the outline of a crowned figure, her expression unreadable. "These are my ancestors," she murmured. "But how? This place must be older than our recorded history." Darius watched her carefully. "Perhaps your people's history goes back further than you realized, Your Majesty." Before Azara could respond, a low rumble shook the chamber. Dust and small debris rained down from the ceiling, and both of them instinctively looked up. "The Kargath," Darius said grimly. "They must be using their machines to search the tunnels. We need to find a way out of here." Azara nodded, her face set in determination despite the pain evident in her eyes. "There," she pointed to a small alcove partially hidden behind a fallen statue. "That looks like it might lead somewhere." As they made their way towards the alcove, Azara stumbled, nearly falling. Darius caught her, his arm wrapping around her waist to steady her. For a moment, their faces were inches apart, and something unspoken passed between them. Azara quickly looked away, but not before Darius caught a glimpse of vulnerability in her eyes. The alcove led to a narrow passageway, barely wide enough for them to walk side by side. As they progressed, the air grew thick with the scent of incense and old magic. The walls were lined with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "I don't like this," Azara muttered, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Darius shared her unease. "We don't have much choice, Your Majesty." It's either this or face the Kargath. Suddenly the passageway opened into a circular chamber. At its center stood a pedestal, upon which rested an ornate box covered in the same glowing symbols they had seen in the corridor. Azara approached the pedestal, her eyes fixed on the box. "I've seen this before," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "In the oldest texts of our people. The Scepter of Ages, a weapon of immense power. It was thought to be a myth." As she reached out to touch the box, Darius grabbed her wrist. "Wait. We don't know what kind of traps might be guarding it." Azara glared at him, but there was less heat in it than before. "Unhand me, human. I am still your queen." Darius released her but didn't back away. "And as your current protector, I'm advising caution. Let me examine it first." To his surprise, Azara nodded. "Very well, proceed." Darius carefully inspected the pedestal and the box, looking for any signs of traps or magical wards. Finding none, he gently lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a scepter of exquisite craftsmanship. Its handle was made of a metal Darius had never seen before, and at its top sat a crystal that seemed to contain a swirling galaxy. Azara's breath caught in her throat. "It's real," she whispered, reaching out to as Azara's fingers closed around the Scepter of Ages. A surge of energy pulsed through the chamber. The crystal atop the scepter flared with an otherworldly light, bathing the queen and her reluctant companion in its eerie glow. Darius instinctively stepped back, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice tinged with concern, "perhaps we should." But Azara was beyond hearing. Her eyes, usually sharp and calculating, had taken on a distant, almost dreamy quality. The scepter hummed in her grasp, its power seeming to flow into her very being. For a moment, the pain of her injuries appeared to vanish, her posture straightening as she stood tall and regal once more. "I can feel it," she whispered, her voice resonating with newfound strength. "The power of my ancestors, the might of our kingdom, it's all here, Darius. With this, we can drive the Kargath from our lands and restore our people to glory." Darius watched her warily, noting the feverish gleam in her eyes. "Your Majesty, we should focus on escaping first. The Kargath are still." As if summoned by his words, a distant explosion rocked the temple. Dust and small debris rained down from the ceiling, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. "They're getting closer," Darius urged, reaching for Azara's arm. "We need to move, now." But Azara shook off his touch, her eyes blazing. "No," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "I will not run any longer. With the Scepter of Ages, I have the power to face our enemies head-on." Before Darius could protest, Azara strode towards the chamber's exit, the scepter held high. Its crystal pulsed with increasing intensity, responding to the queen's emotions. Darius had no choice but to follow, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and grudging admiration for her bravery. As they emerged into the main temple chamber, they were met with the sight of a dozen Kargath soldiers, their hulking forms silhouetted against the dust-filled air. At their head stood General Forkoth, his scarred face twisted into a triumphant sneer. Well, well," he growled, his voice like gravel. "The mighty Queen Azara cornered at last. And with only a slave for company. How the mighty have fallen." Azara's response was swift and terrible. With a cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the temple, she raised the Scepter of Ages. A blinding beam of energy erupted from its crystal, carving a path of destruction through the Kargath ranks. Soldiers were thrown back, their armor melting under the intense heat. Forkoth's sneer turned to shock, then rage. "Kill them," he roared, drawing his massive war hammer. What followed was a battle unlike any Darius had ever witnessed. Azara, empowered by the scepter, moved with supernatural grace and speed. Each swing of the ancient artifact sent waves of energy crashing into their enemies. The Kargath, for all their brute strength and advanced weaponry, found themselves outmatched by this display of arcane might. Darius, armed only with a fallen soldier's sword, did his best to guard Azara's flank. He parried blows and struck when he could, all the while marveling at the transformation of the queen he had once seen as nothing more than a cruel mistress. As the battle raged, however, Darius began to notice something alarming. With each use of the scepter's power, Azara's movements became more erratic. The wound in her side, temporarily forgotten in the rush of power, had begun to bleed anew. Her face, at first flushed with the thrill of victory, now looked pale and drawn. "Your Majesty," Darius called out, dispatching another Kargath warrior. "You need to stop. The scepter is draining you." But Azara seemed beyond reason. Her eyes, now glowing with the same light as the sept. The temple chamber had become a maelstrom of chaos and destruction. Azara, wielding the Scepter of Ages with reckless abandon, continued to unleash devastating blasts of energy against the Kargath forces. The air crackled with arcane power, and the very stones beneath their feet trembled with each thunderous impact. Darius fought desperately to keep up with the queen's frenzied assault, his borrowed sword flashing as he parried and struck at any enemy who dared to approach. But even as he marveled at Azara's newfound might, a growing sense of dread gnawed at him. "Your Majesty, please," he shouted over the din of battle. "You must stop." The scepter is killing you. His words fell on deaf ears. Azara's eyes blazed with an unearthly light, her face contorted in a rictus of pain and ecstasy. With each blast from the scepter, her body shuddered, and fresh rivulets of blood seeped from her reopened wound. General Forkoth, having retreated to the rear of his forces, bellowed orders to his remaining troops. Surround her. Wear her down. The Kargath warriors, though clearly terrified of Azara's power, began to encircle the queen and her lone defender. Darius found himself hard-pressed to fend off attacks from multiple directions, his muscles burning with exertion. Azara, he cried out, abandoning all pretense of formality. Listen to me, we need to retreat. For a brief moment, the queen's gaze flickered towards him, a hint of recognition breaking through her power-induced trance. But then her eyes hardened once more, and she raised the scepter high. I will not flee, she snarled, her voice distorted and echoing strangely. I am Azara, queen of the Zephyrian Empire. I do not run from battle. With a primal scream, she brought the scepter down, slamming its base against the stone floor. A shockwave of pure energy exploded outward, knocking friend and foe alike off their feet. Darius felt himself hurled backward, his head cracking against a pillar as he fell. Dazed and disoriented, he struggled to his knees, blinking away the spots dancing before his eyes. As his vision cleared, he saw Zara standing at the center of the chamber, surrounded by the fallen bodies of Kargath warriors. The scepter pulsed erratically in her grasp, its crystal flickering like a dying star. It's over, Azara gasped, her voice weak and ragged. We've won. But even as the words left her lips, her legs buckled beneath her. The scepter clattered to the ground as she collapsed, her body racked with violent tremors. No, Darius shouted, scrambling to his feet and rushing to her side. He cradled her head in his lap, his heart pounding with fear as he took in her ashen face and labored breathing. Azara, he pleaded, all thoughts of status and propriety forgotten. Stay with me. You can't die, not now. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with difficulty. Darius, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I was wrong. About so much. Before he could respond, a low chuckle echoed through the chamber. Darius looked up to see General Forkoth rising from the rubble, his armor dented and scorched but his malevolent grin intact. How touching, the Kargath leader sneered, hefting his war hammer. The slave comforting his dying queen. I'll be sure to carve that image on both your tombstones. Darius gently laid Azara's head down and stood, placing himself between her and Forkoth. He retrieved his fallen sword, gripping it tightly despite his exhaustion. You'll have to go through me first, he growled, settling into a fighting stance. Forkoth's grin widened. With pleasure. The general charged forward, his massive hammer swinging in a deadly arc. Darius barely. The journey through the mountain pass was grueling. Azara, still weak from her overuse of the Scepter of Ages, leaned heavily on Darius as they navigated the treacherous terrain. The icy wind whipped around them, carrying flurries of snow that stung their faces and obscured their vision. We should find shelter soon, Darius said, his voice barely audible over the howling gale. This storm is getting worse. Azara nodded weakly, her pride momentarily set aside in the face of their dire circumstances. There, she pointed with a trembling hand, I think I see a cave entrance. Darius squinted through the swirling snow and saw the dark opening in the mountainside. With renewed determination, he guided them towards it, half carrying the queen as her strength continued to wane. As they stumbled into the relative shelter of the cave, both sank to the ground, exhausted. Darius immediately set about gathering what meager supplies they had left, working to start a small fire with flint and some dry moss he found deeper in the cave. Azara watched him work, her expression a mixture of grudging respect and lingering suspicion. You've survived worse than this, haven't you? She asked, her voice hoarse. Darius paused in his efforts, meeting her gaze. I have, he admitted. Life as a slave, it teaches you to endure. A flicker of something perhaps guilt passed across Azara's face. And yet you chose to save me, to stay with me. Why? The fire finally caught, casting a warm glow over their makeshift camp. Darius sat back, considering his words carefully. Because despite everything, I believe in the kingdom you could build. A just kingdom, one where people like me wouldn't have to suffer as slaves. Azara's eyes widened slightly at his boldness. In the past, such words might have earned him a harsh punishment. But now, weakened and dependent on this man she had once seen as beneath her, she found herself truly listening. You think I could build such a kingdom? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Darius nodded slowly. I've seen your strength, your determination, but more than that, I've seen glimpses of compassion in you. If you could extend that compassion to all your people, not just those born to privilege. He trailed off, suddenly aware that he might have overstepped, but Azara didn't lash out. Instead, she seemed lost in thought, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames of their small fire. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the howling of the wind outside. Finally, Azara spoke again, her voice carrying a weight of decision. If we survive this, if we reclaim my throne, I swear to you, Darius, things will be different. No more slavery. No more unjust laws that favor the nobility at the expense of the common people. Darius looked at her, searching her face for any sign of deception. Finding none, he allowed himself a small smile. That's a start, Your Majesty. But words are easy, actions will be harder. Azara nodded, a hint of her old fire returning to her eyes. Then let my first action be this: from this moment on, you are no longer a slave. You are free, Darius. And should we succeed, I would have you as my advisor, to help me build this new kingdom you speak of. The offer stunned Darius into momentary silence. When he finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion. I accept, Your Majesty. Thank you. As the night wore on, they talked more openly than ever before. Azara shared stories of her childhood, of the weight of expectation that had been placed upon her shoulders from a young age. Darius spoke of his life before enslavement, of the family he had lost and the dreams he had been forced to abandon. With each shared story, the barriers between them crumbled further. Azara began to see Darius not as a former slave or even a reluctant ally, but as a man of integrity and wisdom. Darius, in turn, saw beyond Azara's royal facade to the woman beneath, flawed, yes, but capable of growth and genuine change. As dawn approached, as the first light of dawn crept into their cave shelter, Azara and Darius prepared to continue their journey. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow that glittered in the early morning sun. Despite the beauty of their surroundings, both were acutely aware of the dangers that still lay ahead. We should reach the rebel camp by nightfall if we maintain a steady pace, Darius said, studying the crude map he had sketched in the dirt. Azara nodded, her face set with determination. Then let's not waste any more time. The longer we delay, the more my people suffer under Kargath rule. As they set out, Azara found herself relying less on Darius for physical support. The rest had done her good, and she felt her strength returning with each step. However, she now leaned on him in a different way, for guidance, for counsel, for the kind of support she had never before allowed herself to accept. Their path took them through a narrow mountain pass, the sheer cliffs on either side making them feel small and vulnerable. As they walked, Azara broached a subject that had been weighing on her mind. Darius, she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, I've been thinking about what you said last night. About building a just kingdom. Darius glanced at her, curiosity evident in his eyes. Yes? I realize now that I've been ruling based on what I was taught, not on what is right, Azara continued. But I'm not sure I know how to be the kind of ruler my people truly need. Darius was silent for a moment, considering his words carefully. The fact that you're asking these questions is a good start, he said finally. Many rulers never even reach that point. Azara frowned. But it's not enough, is it? Questions without actions are meaningless. True, Darius agreed, but actions without thought can be just as dangerous. The key is to find a balance, to listen, to learn, and then to act with wisdom and compassion. As they continued their journey, their conversation delved deeper into the intricacies of governance, social structures, and the responsibilities of leadership. Azara found herself absorbing Darius's insights with a hunger she had never before felt for knowledge. By midday, they had descended from the mountains into a dense forest. The air was warmer here, humid and alive with the sounds of birds and insects. As they paused to rest and eat some of their dwindling supplies, Azara noticed Darius's sudden tension. What is it? She asked, her hand instinctively moving to the scepter of ages at her hip. Darius held up a hand for silence, his eyes scanning their surroundings. We're being watched, he whispered. No sooner had the words left his mouth than a group of armed figures emerged from the trees, surrounding them. Their clothing marked them as neither Kargath nor Azara's own people, but a mix of various ethnicities and backgrounds. Well, a gruff voice called out. What do we have here? A couple of lost travelers or perhaps spies? Azara straightened, her regal bearing asserting itself despite their dire situation. I am Queen Azara of the Zephyrian Empire, and this is my advisor, Darius. We seek an audience with the rebel leaders. A murmur ran through the group, and the man who had spoken, a burly, scarred individual with a shock of red hair, stepped forward. The Queen, Last we heard, you were either dead or had abandoned your people to the Kargath. Why should we believe you now? Before Azara could respond, Darius spoke up. Because she's here, risking her life to save her people. She could have fled, could have sought safety elsewhere. Instead, she's chosen to fight. The man considered this, his eyes darting between Azara and Darius. And you're not Zephyrian, why are you with her? Because I believe in the kingdom she can build, Darius replied without hesitation. A just kingdom, where all people are treated with dignity and respect. The sincerity in Darius's voice seemed to. The rebel camp was a bustling hive of activity, hidden deep within the heart of the forest. Tents and makeshift structures sprawled across a large clearing, with people of various backgrounds working together in an organized chaos. As Azara and Darius were led through the camp, they could feel the weight of countless eyes upon them, a mix of curiosity, hope, and suspicion. Their escort, the red-haired man who had introduced himself as Brock, brought them to a large central tent. Wait here, he grunted, before disappearing inside. Azara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She felt Darius's reassuring presence beside her and drew strength from it. After what seemed like an eternity, Brock emerged and nodded for them to enter. Inside the tent, they found themselves facing a diverse group of individuals seated around a large wooden table. At its head sat a striking woman with silver hair and piercing green eyes, her bearing unmistakably that of a leader. Queen Azara, the woman said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent Azara couldn't quite place. I am Lyra, leader of the resistance. We've heard many things about you, some good, some less so. But your presence here speaks volumes. Azara stepped forward, her chin held high. I come seeking an alliance. The Kargath threat looms over us all, and only by standing together do we have a chance of defeating them. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. An alliance? With the very queen whose policies have oppressed many of the people in this camp? Why should we trust you? For a moment Azara felt her old pride and defensiveness rise up within her. But then she remembered her conversations with Darius, the lessons she had learned on their journey. She took a deep breath and did something she had never done before as a ruler. She humbled herself. You're right to question my intentions, Azara said, her voice steady but tinged with regret. I have made many mistakes in my rule. I've been blind to the suffering of those outside my immediate circle, and I've allowed injustice to flourish under my reign. But I stand before you now, not as a conqueror or a tyrant, but as someone who has seen the error of her ways and wishes to make amends. A murmur ran through the assembled leaders. Lyra leaned forward, her interest piqued. Fine words, your majesty, but words are wind. What assurances can you offer that things will be different if we help you reclaim your throne? Azara glanced at Darius, who gave her an encouraging nod. She turned back to Lyra and the other leaders. I propose a new form of governance. One where power is not concentrated in the hands of a single ruler, but shared among representatives from all corners of the kingdom. Where laws are made not for the benefit of the few, but for the good of all. Where every voice, no matter how small, has the right to be heard. The tent fell silent as the weight of Azara's words sank in. It was Darius who broke the silence, stepping forward to stand beside his queen. I have witnessed Queen Azara's transformation firsthand, he said, his voice filled with conviction. She has faced her flaws, questioned her beliefs, and emerged stronger for it. The kingdom she envisions is one worth fighting for, a beacon of hope in these dark times. Lyra studied them both intently, her gaze moving from Azara to Darius and back again. Finally, she spoke. Your words are compelling, and your vision is admirable, but intentions alone are not enough to win a war or rebuild a kingdom. What do you bring to this alliance besides promises? Azara reached for the scepter of ages at her hip, drawing it forth with a flourish. The artifact hummed with power, casting a soft glow throughout the tent. I bring this, the scepter of ages. A weapon of immense power, thought lost to legend. With it, we can turn the tide against the Kargath and reclaim our lands. The leaders around the table leaned in, their eyes wide with awe and curiosity. Lyra, however, remained composed. An impressive artifact, to be sure, but power, as you've learned, can. The dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The allied forces of Azara's kingdom and the rebel resistance stood atop a hill overlooking the sprawling Kargath encampment in the valley below. Tension hung thick in the air as soldiers checked their weapons and armor one last time. Azara stood at the forefront, the scepter of ages gleaming in her hand. Beside her, Darius surveyed the enemy forces with a grim expression. Lyra approached, her silver hair catching the early morning light. Your Majesty, Lyra said, her voice low, our scouts report that the Kargath are preparing for a massive push. They mean to overwhelm us with sheer numbers. Azara nodded, her face set with determination. Then we shall meet them with courage and unity. Are the troops ready? As ready as they'll ever be, Lyra replied. But I must warn you, even with our combined forces and your artifact, this will be a close fight. I understand, Azara said. She turned to address the gathered army, her voice ringing out clear and strong. People of the kingdom, rebels and loyalists alike. Today we fight not just for our lives, but for the future of our land. The Kargath seek to destroy everything we hold dear, but we will show them the strength of a united people. A cheer went up from the troops, and Azara felt a swell of pride. She caught Darius's eye and he gave her a small nod of approval. How far they had come from their initial animosity. As if on cue, a horn blasted from the Kargath camp. The enemy forces began to pour out of their tents, a sea of dark armor and cruel weapons. It's time, Darius said, drawing his sword. Azara raised the scepter of ages high, its power thrumming through her. For the kingdom, she cried, and the allied army surged forward. The two forces clashed in the valley with a thunderous roar. Azara found herself in the thick of the battle, the scepter blazing with energy as she wielded it against the Kargath warriors. Each swing sent out arcs of power that cut through enemy ranks, but for every foe that fell, two more seemed to take their place. Darius fought at her side, his sword flashing as he protected her flank. Despite the chaos of battle, Azara marveled at how in sync they had become, anticipating each other's moves and covering each other's weaknesses. The battle raged on, the ground becoming slick with blood and the air filled with the cries of the wounded and dying. Azara could see her troops beginning to falter under the relentless Kargath assault. "We need to reach their leader," Lyra shouted over the din of battle, fighting her way to Azara's side. "Cut off the head and the body will fall." Azara nodded grimly. She raised the scepter once more, channeling its power to clear a path through the enemy forces. "With me," she called to Darius and Lyra. The trio fought their way through the Kargath lines, heading for the massive figure at the rear of the enemy army. Krull, the Kargath warlord, stood nearly 8 feet tall, his armor adorned with the bones of his fallen enemies. As they approached, Krull turned his attention to them, his eyes gleaming with malice. "So, the little queen comes to face me at last," he growled, hefting an enormous battle-axe. Azara stood her ground, the scepter pulsing with energy. "Your reign of terror ends today, Krull." The warlord laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Bold words from one who couldn't even hold her own throne. "Let's see if you can back them up." He charged forward with surprising speed for one so large. Azara barely had time to raise the scepter in defense as Krull's axe came crashing down. The impact sent shockwaves through her body, but the scepter held. Darius and Lyra moved to flank Krull, but the warlord's massive sweeping attacks kept them at bay. Azara found herself locked in a deadly dance with the Kargath leader, the scepter of ages clashing against his battle-axe in a shower of sparks and energy. As they fought, Azara could feel the power of the scepter growing, responding to her determination and the desperation of the moment. She began to understand its true potential, not just as a weapon, but as a catalyst for change. In a moment of clarity, Azara realized what she had to do. She caught Darius's eye and nodded slightly. He understood immediately, moving to distract Krull with a daring lunge. As the warlord turned to parry Darius's attack, Azara raised the scepter high. "For the kingdom, for our people, for a future of peace," she cried out. The scepter of ages erupted with blinding light, its power washing over the battlefield like a tidal wave. Kargath warriors fell to their knees, their weapons turning to dust in their hands. Krull roared in defiance, but even he could not withstand the artifact's might. His armor crumbled, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. In one fluid motion, Azara thrust the scepter forward, its energy piercing Krull's chest. The warlord's eyes widened in shock before he collapsed, his reign of terror finally at an end. A hush fell over the battlefield as both sides realized what had happened. Then, a cheer rose from the allied forces, growing in volume until it echoed across the valley. The remaining Kargath, leaderless and disarmed, surrendered en masse. As the dust settled, Azara found herself surrounded by her people, former slaves and nobles alike, all looking to her with hope and admiration. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Darius, a proud smile on his face. "You did it, Your Majesty," he said softly. "You've saved us all." Azara shook her head. "No, Darius. We did it. All of us, together." She addressed the crowd, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "This victory belongs to every one of you who stood against tyranny, who fought for our freedom. And it is together that we will rebuild our kingdom, stronger and more united than ever before." As the sun set on the battlefield, casting long shadows across the land, Azara knew that the real work was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, rebuilding cities, healing old wounds, and forging a new path for her people. But as she looked at the faces around her, Darius, Lyra, and countless others who had fought by her side, she knew they would face those challenges together. The scepter of ages hummed softly in her hand, a reminder of the power of unity and the strength that comes from overcoming differences. Azara smiled, feeling truly worthy of her crown for the first time. The fierce warrior queen had become something more, a leader who understood the value of every life in her kingdom, from the highest noble to the lowliest former slave. As they began the long journey back to the capital, Azara walked side by side with Darius, no longer her slave but her trusted advisor and friend. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. The tale of Queen Azara and the former slave who helped her reclaim her throne would be told for generations to come. A story of redemption, unity, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the face of adversity. And so, as night fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, a new chapter began for the kingdom, one of peace, prosperity, and the enduring power of trust and friendship. Subscribe to our channels, Cheaters and Chills, for more thrilling sci-fi adventures and exclusive content.